So is China stealing research? Universities globally, including Australian universities and China's Thousand Talents program, have been in the news lately. China's Thousand Talents program have been described as an initiative which seeks to recruit leading scientists for a secretive research program that offers lucrative salaries and perks but requires them to work for Chinese government purposes. Professor Laurenceson is an expert on contemporary developments in China's economy and the Australia-China relationship. James, thanks for joining us.
Good to be with you.
Tell us more about Australia's collaboration with its top research partners such as the UK, US and China.
You mentioned a number of countries, and that's for good reason. Australia obviously has pretty limited domestic resources. We only account for actually less than 1.5% of global R&D spending. So we've always relied actually on international collaboration to stay at the knowledge frontier. A big three, China's now our number one partner. What I mean by that is more Australian scientific and research publications have a co-author affiliated with a Chinese institution than any other country, about 16.2% of the total. America's number two with 15.5%, and then the UK is in third place with 11.7%. So you can see the diverse range of partners that we have. That's long been the case. What has changed over time is the weight given to each partner. China has certainly been rising in prominence.
Is all this research conducted in universities, or does it include private institutions?
Yeah, that's an important point. In Australia's case, it overwhelmingly is in universities, unlike, say, America or China for that matter, which have giant technology companies. Australia doesn't. So what that means is most of our scientific research is conducted in universities, and it also means that it's basic foundational research, as opposed to research that's right on the cusp of being commercialized, like you would expect a private firm to be most interested in. So that's another reason why we have to be a bit careful that we don't just automatically transplant debates around research collaboration from America to Australia, because the nature of the research is quite different.
Where is Australia's research collaboration with China mainly concentrated?
Mostly in the hard sciences and engineering. So, for example, there's three areas, in particular, material science, chemical engineering and energy, where more than 30% of Australia's total scientific publications in those subject fields involves a Chinese collaborator. So they're the big three. And it's interesting because when you look at where we work with America, it's actually a different area. It's more in life sciences, medicine, those sorts of spaces. So when we work with China and when we work with America, they're actually not competitive. They're actually quite complementary.
China's Thousand Talents program has had some publicity of late in Australia and the US. Would you describe it as a Chinese recruitment program for scientists?
I think that's largely fair. It certainly is an attempt to attract talent, whether you want to call it a recruitment program or not, but an attempt to attract talent. And I've got to say, Mike, that is entirely unremarkable. Many countries have scientific talent recruitment programs, including Australia. And actually, this is where context matters. So I see a lot of the headlines recently presenting the Thousand Talents program in some nefarious way, but China's got a real problem. Let me explain it to you just with a quick example. There was a study done last year that found 85% of China's best researchers in artificial intelligence weren't actually in China. Most of them were overseas. So there's a strong incentive for to try to bring some of those people back home.
Are there likely to be many researchers in Australian universities involved?
Well, we know there are some because they've told their universities that they are involved. So this is another thing we need to be careful of. The fact that a scholar is involved in the Thousand Talents program is not a sign that they're disloyal to Australia. Sure, if they're hiding that affiliation, that would be a problem, but that's a separate question.
It'd be pretty hard to hide it though, wouldn't it, if you think about it? I mean, it's not something you can keep a secret for a long time.
Right. There's plenty of open source information that, for example, if our security agencies had a particular interest in a given academic, I don't imagine it would be too hard to track down. And by the way, universities are very clear in what they expect of their academics. I can assure you, where I work at, we have an outside work policy that's very, very clear. So all the academics know what they're meant to do.
So then, what are the most contentious aspects of the program?
So we're dealing in allegations mostly. So, for example, some of the allegations have been that the Chinese side is instructing participants in the Thousand Talents program to keep it a secret from their Australian institutions. There's also allegations that Chinese Australian scientists, or actually not just of Chinese ethnicity, but Australian scientists are signing up to this program and then registering IP in China. Well, that's an issue, but it's not. Again, I think you've got to separate them. So if that's the concern, then you want to make sure that universities have in place the policies to protect IP. And I can assure you, Mike, Australian universities are very keenly watching the dollars. So if they see one of their academics who is involved in research that could have a commercial application, they'll be very keen to sign that academic up.
What do you think will result from this? Will Australia's research relationship or trade relationship with China then be affected?
I remain optimistic, and I think a lot of this, what will happen, will be dependent upon how the government implements this new legislation that they're talking about. For example, if it's simply about having transparency around the research collaborations universities have in place, well, that's fine. That's not going to stop collaboration. But if what it does, or indeed if the government starts doing it themselves, starts citing those research collaborations and somehow using it as material for some McCarthyist witch hunt, as we've already seen some media agencies willing to do, that could well be quite disastrous. I mean, why would you? Say you're a top Chinese Australian scientist at a leading Australian university, why would you cop that sort of vilification? You're going to go elsewhere. And you know what? You may not go to China. You may go to Canada, the UK, America, or somewhere else.
Interesting days ahead. Professor James Laurenceson, thank you very much.
My pleasure.